Oh, hello there. I suppose most of you know who I am. For 14 years I acted the part of a British secret agent. I was given some splendid secret weapons, ordinary everyday objects that transform into quite extraordinary devices. It is an unwritten rule that spies in movies have great gadgets. I know I did. Now, you might have thought that these were the results of over-imaginative movie people getting carried away in the props department. Far from it. When it comes to espionage, the real tools of the trade are even more outrageous. From silenced pistols and miniature cameras to the poison-tipped umbrella and the jet-propelled backpack, the history of espionage has been illuminated by the secret agent's gadget. Some of them were deadly. All of them were top secret. And a remarkable number of them actually worked. The birth of the real James Bond gadget took place 60 years ago, in the dark days of the Second World War. As Europe surrendered to Nazi occupation and Britain braced itself for the threat of German invasion, in 1940, Winston Churchill set up a new top-secret organization. The Special Operations Executive, or SOE, created a new type of secret agent, one who combined traditional espionage with sabotage. SOE agents faced death if captured. It was vital that their equipment did not give them away.
Their equipment had to be made as it would be in the countries that they were going to work in. It was no good having an English toothbrush in a German village.
Brian's father, Charles, created new ways of hiding vital spy tools.
Well, my father said, there's a lot of space in a shaving brush. Can't you do something about shortening the amount of cement and finding a space in the back? So they did that. Out would come a map and a reasonably accurate compass set in the bottom. That little green lump is one of these maps rolled up. Now that map is about nearly 2 foot by 2 foot silk tissue, and this shows the whole of Germany and all the surrounding borders.
One of the most ingenious secret gadgets was designed to help captured agents escape.
My father was thinking about a fine saw. If they could put them in a shoelace, then you could take a shoelace out, and this kind of lace would saw through a couple of iron bars about the size of your little finger. I've been lucky enough to meet a Hungarian here who used this on more than one occasion to drop the odd German or two.
Obviously, there were times when a shoelace didn't quite cut the mustard.
It was realised that they would need specialised weapons to conduct certain tasks, such as assassination of collaborators or enemy personnel. So from the early days, SOE were experimenting with making silenced versions of existing weapons. One of the most successful was the American High Standard. This silences very effectively, and being a target pistol, it was inherently accurate. This is the Welrod. This is in 7.65mm caliber, which is more effective for killing people, basically, than the 2.2 cartridge used in the High Standard. It doesn't have the mechanical noise inherent in many other pistols, because every time it fires it has to be hand-cocked by means of this bolt. Another silenced weapon was the sleeve gun. It was carried, slung around the shoulder and down the sleeve, and was fired by pressing this button here.
Driven by this very British mixture of improvisation and inventiveness, SOE's catalogue of special devices grew increasingly fiendish. A recent graduate from Oxford University, George Brown was recruited to SOE in 1943.
This is me testing the well bomb on Staines Reservoir in 1943. The well bomb was a little electrically operated propeller which you could strap onto your back. The idea was that you would be taken somewhere in a submarine and launched from the submarine with this on your back, and it would propel you onto the coast of France or somewhere else. I found it worked perfectly well, but there was absolutely no way in which you could steer it. So I just spent about half an hour going round and round in circles on Staines Reservoir looking up at the sky. And as far as I know, nothing more was ever heard of it.
SOE had rather more success in the camouflage of plastic explosives.
The best known example was the explosive rat. The rat was provided and someone had the gruesome task of emptying it out, so you had a hollow rat skin. That was then filled with plastic explosive, and into the plastic explosive a time pencil with a small primer at the end was inserted. The operator would then squeeze the copper tube at the end of the time pencil. In due course, that would set off the primer, which would set off the explosive, and the rat would explode.
Its effectiveness as a weapon is unknown, but the explosive rat did have an impact on enemy morale. When a consignment of them was discovered by the Germans, every rat in Europe became a potential bomb.
And this probably caused a great deal more chaos and confusion than blowing one rat up could ever have caused.
Rats were just the beginning. Take the human soul sneaker, for example. The idea is that when you're creeping ashore to spy on the enemy, you wear a pair of these. Sneakers with human footprint soles, allowing the agent to blend in with the barefoot locals and without the risk of his getting sand in his toes. Ingenious. An ideal gadget for the perfect secret agent.
Bond. James Bond.
Be James Bond in James Bond's world. 007 Nightfire.
Challenge everything.
The new Philishave Sensitech, Bond's shaver of choice, set for comfort.
By the end of the Second World War, SOE had given birth to a new type of secret agent. He was armed, he was deadly, and he was equipped with a wide range of fiendish secret gadgets. Sounds rather familiar, doesn't it? This new type of spy hadn't gone unnoticed by a naval intelligence officer called Ian Fleming. He published his first novel in 1953.
Fleming, of course, when he came to create James Bond, he was looking at that sort of agent. He actually uses gadgets, he actually kills people, and is a sort of action man.
Just like the secret agents he was based on, Fleming's action man needed the right tools for the job.
Ian Fleming's initial choice for James Bond's arm was a Beretta 6.35mm self-loading pistol. It's the sort of thing that was widely distributed among the civilian population, and therefore it represented a sterile arm which didn't automatically identify someone as being an agent. The downside of this weapon was that you had traded off concealability against effectiveness.
For some, the Beretta was too lightweight for a spy like James Bond.
Ian Fleming was in correspondence with a firearms expert called Geoffrey Boothroyd. He suggested two firearms, a Smith & Wesson Centennial revolver and a Walther PPK pistol, and it was the PPK that won out. It's very reliable and it has a major advantage over the Beretta. With the Beretta, if you carry it cocked, loaded and ready to go, there is some risk that you will have an accidental discharge, which is not a happy thing in any circumstances.
Well, I can assure you that I have never suffered an accidental discharge while on active duty. But it is not the power of the pistol in your pocket. It is the accuracy of your shot that counts. Really. The Second World War may have provided the inspiration for James Bond's gadgets, but it was against the background of a new conflict that they were to flourish. The Cold War was fought almost exclusively by spies. One of its first shots was fired in Moscow in 1946.
Some little girls in the traditional costumes made this presentation to the American ambassador, and he got all misty-eyed and sentimental because it was such a nice gesture. And he found out later it wasn't so nice.
Little could the American ambassador in Moscow know the true function of the wooden carving.
The ambassador would never imagine that the gift given to him by the young pioneers carried a hidden listening device, which would be operational for many years, just behind his head.
Working without batteries and without wires, the wooden carving was an amazing piece of spy craftiness. Hidden inside the carving was a diaphragm and a metal tuning fork which responded to the vibrations caused by human speech. By aiming a high-frequency radio beam at an aerial attached to the tuning post, the Russians were able to hear every conversation in the ambassador's office.
It could not be detected, as a matter of fact, because of its special nature. It was dormant. During a regular search, it could not be found.
It remained in the U.S. Embassy until the mid-50s.
It operated at a frequency of about 380 megahertz. It sounded like a clear FM bug transmitter. The only trouble was that if someone walked in the path, they could cut off the signal.
This was a remarkable feat by any intelligence or counterintelligence to place a bugging device in the office of any ambassador.
We were at a point in history where we didn't even have any transmitter that would be effective in eavesdropping, transmitter with battery or AC mains power. And they come along with a little bit of metal, required no operating power at all.
1-0 to the Soviet Union. The Cold War was off to a flying start in Moscow. In Washington, D.C., the CIA were about to find an unlikely ally coming to their aid.
The hearing aid industry caused the development of small microphones, and so we bought small microphones from commercial sources, and they were quite satisfactory. They were made, after all, to reproduce the human voice in hearing aids and reasonably well shielded so that stray electrical fields wouldn't affect them too much.
With the hearing aid industry enlisted in the fight against communism, it was boom time for buggists.
Favourite item, of course, is a table lamp because it's always powered. Then you go and buy the absolutely identical unit, fit it up with the transmitter, and then when you break in, you swap them over.
With transistorization, there seemed no limit to where a bug could be hidden.
The first pen that I produced was in about 1961. It must write because you have to write with it. The idea behind it was not as a bugging device in the normal sense. The reason was to have a device that one could take to a meeting and leave on his desk that he would not be suspicious about. If you can ask the right questions, when you've left the room, they will tell each other the answers.
By the late 60s, our American allies had come up with an even better idea.
CIA was involved in a project known as Acoustic Kitty, and the idea was to use the CAD as a listening device suitably wired so it would be able to transmit what it heard.
Acoustic Kitty was a Frankenstein-like attempt to turn a cat into a spy.
And the idea was that a cat's ear, like a human ear, would tune out irrelevant white noise, the type of noise that you hear at a cocktail party, clinking of glasses or people moving on a couch, and that if you could get the cat in the right position, in the right location, it would be able to transmit back what it was hearing, which would hopefully be a sensitive conversation. What happened was that this cat was wired up, and they took it out to a area where they were going to send it out across the street and test its eavesdropping capability. But before it could cross the street, it got run over, and that ended the project and the cat.
In the movies, being a secret agent consists of jetting around the world, meeting beautiful women in exotic locations, and occasionally donning a nice dinner suit. I am afraid in the real world, spies rarely come so well dressed. Most are embarrassingly suburban. The Cold War was fought on many battlefields, but none were less exotic than Cranley Drive, an unremarkable street in the West London suburb of Ruislip.
It was a fairly quiet, rather dull sort of place to grow up, I guess. Into this arrived these couple called the Krogers.
When Helen and Peter Kroger moved into Cranley Drive in the mid-50s, they stood out a mile.
Helen particularly was like something we'd never seen before, really. She wore red nail varnish, you know, kind of things that respectable ladies didn't do then. And she was very loud, very brash, had a very sort of corn-crakey voice. And she could whistle the length of the street, you know, with fingers in the mouth job, and you'd be on your bike and you'd hear this whistle.
Eccentric, maybe, but no one could have imagined the truth about the couple who claimed to be antiquarian booksellers from Canada.
The Krogers, Peter and Helen, were, of course, Morris and Lona Cohen. Old-time communists from New York. They'd been trained when they went back to Moscow after leaving America to handle communications from major illegal spies working in Britain at the time.
The Krogers were, in fact, KGB communication experts. In touch directly with Moscow headquarters, they sent British naval secrets to Russia via microdots. The ideal way to secretly transmit information, the two-step microdot method uses a normal camera to take a photograph. The negative is mounted and photographed again, and it is the twice reduced image on the resulting negative that becomes the microdot. It was all too easy for Peter Kroeger to conceal microdots in the consignments of second-hand books he regularly posted.
The amount of mail originating from the Kroeger household in West London did not attract any attention from either the post office or the postman delivering it.
The Kroegers were arrested in 1961. Suburbia would never be the same again.
The idea it was the Kroegers was just gobsmacking, and working for the Russians, you know, who were, as we all knew then, in the 50s, evil and terrible and a threat to our liberty, was just mind-blowing.
Of course, it was really all about missiles. Back in the mid-50s, America was obsessed with finding out exactly how many of the things Russia had. Unable to move around inside the Soviet Union, they decided to go over it. Tested secretly in 1955 at Nevada's infamous Area 51, the U-2 was commissioned by the CIA to tackle the job of spying on Russia's nuclear capability. Making its first overflight of the USSR in 1956, the U-2 program operated under the cover of the 1st Weather Reconnaissance Squadron. By 1960, 10 U-2s were providing the USA with aerial photographs of once top-secret Russian installations.
There was communications intelligence indicating that there might be a ICBM launch facility at Plesetsk in the northern Soviet Union, and Power's flight, one of its main targets was that area.
With over 27 completed missions, Gary Powers was one of the most experienced U-2 pilots. Little did he know on May the 1st, 1960, as he took off on Operation Grand Slam, that he was about to become one of the most famous spies of the Cold War.
On May 1st, 1960, my father took off from Peshawar, Pakistan at 6:30 a.m. He crossed over the Soviet Union's border at 69,000 feet. He started to flip on and off the camera switches that would take the photographic reconnaissance of the ground below. He was 3.5 hours into the flight at an altitude of 70,500 feet over Sverdlovsk in the central part of the former Soviet Union when there was a bright orange flash.
Incensed by previous spy flights, when Khrushchev heard a U-2 was violating Russian airspace on May Day, he ordered it to be shot down.
The nose pitched forward, the wings broke off, and my father fell inside the cockpit down to an altitude of 30,000 feet. At 30,000 feet, he was able to crawl out of the airplane. He did not use the ejection seat. If he had, his legs would have been severed on the way out.
Eisenhower knew that an American pilot overflying the USSR could be seen as an act of war. He had been assured that U-2s would self-destruct after the pilot ejected. But Powers didn't eject.
Here he is, half in, half out of the plane. He's connected by his air hose. He's trying to reach the destruct mechanism that would destroy the camera evidence and the film evidence, but he couldn't. It was no longer within his reach. He was able to break free of the air hose, fall free of the aircraft, and his parachute opens automatically at 15,000 feet. When he lands on the ground, he's rushed up to by some farmers that are working the field. They ask him questions in Russian. My father shrugs his shoulders, doesn't speak Russian. One of the farmers holds a pitchfork up near him, and then he's able to communicate with them in the dirt, USA.
Gary Powers' capture was a propaganda triumph in Moscow. Oleg Gordievsky was a student at the time.
Radio and television was saying, there was an American spy, there was an American plane, it was shot down, the Americans had been caught red-handed, great embarrassment for the United States, we are triumphing, what they are like, just bloody spies spying upon us, a peaceful and peace-loving Soviet Union.
At his trial, Powers was found guilty of spying, but the real damage was already done.
For us, it was a matter of really pride that we finally got the guy, that our defenses are top-notch, that we can reach high in the sky and no one will escape punishment.
In America, all U-2 overflights of the USSR were cancelled.
Report manned and ready for terminal count. First stage manned and ready.
But the CIA already had a big new gadget up its sleeve to keep an eye on the Russians.
Start on my mark.
Within a matter of months of the time Francis Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union, the United States had perfected the discovery in the Corona system.
3, 2, 1, mark.
Hoisted into orbit by a Discovery rocket, the Corona satellite took spying into space. You thought that they were trying to put a man on the moon, but the CIA were in fact taking a spy camera into orbit over the USSR.
The way the system worked at that point was after the film capsules were used up, they'd actually be ejected. There'd be about 6 of them, and they'd be ejected one at a time.
After taking pictures during its orbit, the Corona satellite jettisoned a pod that fell back to Earth on a parachute. A plane would then fly on a course to intercept the film pod in mid-air.
These were pictures that were taken on the satellite, so they had very, very high quality, and they could actually see the number of aircraft lined up on runways, for example, and they could count the number of missile launchers.
The first Corona spy mission on the 18th of August 1960 provided coverage of 1 million square miles, more than all the U-2 overflights put together.
These are things that the U.S. risked a lot before. They risked a human being shot down. They risked enormous embarrassment if the plane was captured. And now they could overfly the Soviet Union numerous times during the day and take these photographs without ever worrying about it being shot down. So they were enormously happy.
The first spy camera of the space age. The CIA thought they had removed the secret agent from the whole equation. America had aerial surveillance tied up, but the Russians were still fielding a few aces on the ground. Of course, one of the most powerful weapons of espionage isn't a gadget at all. Swallows were agents with a very particular mission.
Swallows were young ladies of beauty, of sorts, attractive enough for any male. They were Soviet KGB agents.
Chief counterintelligence officer at Moscow's KGB headquarters, Oleg Kalugin, knew just how effective a swallow could be. Targeted at visitors and embassy staff, swallows were used to blackmail foreigners into working for the KGB.
Anybody visiting those countries, certainly people from the Western intelligence services, had to be constantly on guard from being compromised. And compromise could mean any situation in which you've committed, by their terms, an illegality or something which might be forbidden by your society.
Seduction was just the start of the operation. What the KGB really needed was evidence.
Soviet hotel rooms, those which were frequented or assigned for foreigners, they were all bugged. Not all rooms were bugged, but most of the rooms were prepared for bugging. Later, they were equipped with video cameras, so we would simultaneously do both things.
With the room wired and the KGB standing by, the Swallow would go operational.
The sex scene would be filmed in the company of a girl or even a man, whatever the sexual orientation. And the person would be presented with a picture and sometimes recruited.
We had a very successful operation in the early 50s when Soviet KGB male Swallow seduced a young American woman from the US Embassy, and she would defect to the USSR, a not very well-known case these days.
I must confess, I never had any trouble with swallows. Obviously, the West didn't take all this lying down, quite the opposite. Our boffins were busy beavering away on a fiendish array of technical devices. Gadgets don't come much more fantastic than the jetpack. Making its debut in the mid-60s, the one-man rocket belt used pressurized hydrogen peroxide to provide just under a minute of sustained flight. For the manufacturer's Bell Aerosystems, this was an ideal stealth weapon. Keen to win government contracts, they demonstrated the jetpack's many possible uses in their 1966 promotional film. Alas, there were no buyers for the jetpack. No self-respecting spy would be seen dead in one.
You see, the use of technical devices abroad, particularly in the work abroad, it's a double-edged sword.
A KGB double agent, Oleg Gordievsky, was only too aware of his fate if found with a spy tool.
As a British agent, working for the British intelligence, if I had been found with a camera in my, inside the KGB station, inside my office, inside the embassy, I would be arrested, sent to Moscow, tried briefly, and shot.
Not standing out in the crowd is the prerequisite of any spy. But that was nigh impossible for CIA agents in Moscow at the height of the Cold War.
The Soviet Union and the other nations of East Europe were, in effect, police states. Therefore, they had a tremendous ability to manipulate, control, and surveil visitors or anyone they directed their attention to.
We were now nose to nose, belly to belly against our principal adversary, the KGB.
The Russians were quick to let the CIA know whose turf they were on.
The first time that I went, my plane landed and there's my man with my name. He says, "May I get your bags?" I said, "I didn't want a car." He said, "Well, I am your car." He was surveillance.
Desperate to find new ways of working undercover, the CIA enlisted the help of Hollywood.
The techniques of disguise and illusion are very powerful techniques, and we do it with role playing. If she wanted to go someplace and do something operational, she may do a simple change. Certainly you can't pick up on somebody's eye color when you're trying to follow them through a dark street. So now the audience has some new things to cue on. The cane, the pipe. You give them an idea that they can follow.
And you give them some props that they can remember, because no one remembers a face.
You know, disguise is really not about 6 inches of makeup. It's really just about props and aids. The artifice is just incidental.
There are many levels of disguise. It depends on what the requirement is, who you're trying to fool, for what purpose, and for how long.
Contrary to popular belief, spies do not generally run around firing guns at each other. Whatever gave you that idea? That is not to say they haven't conjured up some extraordinary ways in which to kill lesser mortals. In the late 70s, the Cold War was increasingly glacial. Spies on both sides of the Iron Curtain were equipped for when things turned nasty.
This was found in Berlin in a KGB female officer's things. It's called the Kiss of Death. This is not a protective weapon. This is an aggressive weapon. It would typically be fired at relatively close range. If you got close enough to a temple, to a vital organ, just one shot. But if you were that close, one shot's all you needed.
Sometimes a gun, even one disguised as lipstick, was just too obvious. Georgy Markov was a Bulgarian dissident. Living in London in the late 70s, his BBC World Service radio broadcasts were a source of irritation to the communist regime he had fled.
Georgy Markov, he'd taken a major dislike to a senior Bulgarian politician and gave him hell on every broadcast that he sent off to Bulgaria. So much so this man decided, I've got to get rid of this troublesome priest who's driving me mad and running down our esteemed leader and government. And he went to the KGB and said, how can I get rid of this man?
Oleg Kalugin was in Moscow when the request came through.
Markov's assassination was devised and executed by the Bulgarian services. But the Soviet KGB provided them with guidance and tools. That is, they provided the Bulgarian KGB with poison and with the umbrella which served as a camouflage.
On the 7th of September 1978, the Bulgarian Secret Service put the plan to assassinate Markov into action in London. While waiting for a bus on Waterloo Bridge, Markov felt a stabbing pain on the back of his thigh. Turning round, he saw a man bending down to pick up an umbrella, who then hailed a cab. Markov died 3 days later, apparently of natural causes.
People started thinking that this was not a straightforward infection during my autopsy. They were expecting me to find some focus of infection, either a chronic cholecystitis or gallbladder infection he'd been nursing for years, or some problem in his lungs or in his kidneys. I found nothing except a lot of small hemorrhages in unusual places.
Finding no source of infection, Rufus Crompton turned to the pimple on the back of Markov's leg.
Markov had the pimple in one leg and the lymph glands were enormous. When I cut into them, they were just hemorrhage. I then thought, well, there is something here.
Upon further examination, the autopsy revealed a tiny poison-coated pellet.
You can see on the table here a silver metal sphere. which is almost precisely the size of the platinum iridium sphere which was taken out of Markov, a bit bigger than a pinhead.
The pellet and the umbrella incident on Waterloo Bridge could only mean one thing.
I think it was fired from an umbrella, say like this. The pellet would be in the tip here. We'd have probably a gas cylinder in the shaft and a trigger mechanism here. It would be pressed against the back of Markov's leg, the trigger pulled. The pellet would have gone through clothing, through skin, and into the blood vessel-rich tissues. This was devilishly clever, really. This was the stuff of spy thriller novels, of the most bizarre type.
Look at this little beauty. Marvelous craftsmanship, but as I'm sure you're aware, not everything in the world of espionage is as it seems. This is a Minox, and it is a camera, just like this, that was used to give the Soviet Union top secret information that had war-winning potential. When John Walker was arrested in 1985, the Russians lost a major asset.
He was one of the best spies in my time, and he was referred to by the former KGB chairman Andropov as spy number 1.
For 17 years, he had sold U.S. naval secrets to the KGB.
Everything that we were saying via the cryptographic systems that we used were being read by the Russians almost in real time.
FBI agent Jerry Richards discovered that Russia's spy number 1 was using one of the oldest tools around.
The Minox camera has been around since the late 30s. This is basically the similar type, almost identical to the type that Walker used. Normally, for taking photographs, you would set it at 18 inches on the scale, hold it vertically over a document, and then on the chain, it conveniently has little notches, of which the last one is exactly 18 inches away.
It was the perfect gadget for Walker, a spy with more luck than talent.
Walker was extremely flamboyant, he was boisterous, he told everybody under the sun about his spying. I mean, his wife knew, his daughters knew, his son knew, his landlord knew, his business partner knew, his in-laws knew. He was very, very lucky that none of them told until eventually his wife did call the FBI.
But in spite of his sloppy spycraft, Walker was hugely successful, making regular trips to Vienna to meet his KGB paymasters.
He supplied them, we figure, somewhere in the vicinity of 1 million documents. And ironically enough, he, over 18 years, got paid about $1 million. So we're talking about $1 a document.
It was a small price for the information he sold.
If we'd have gone to war during that period of time, we'd have lost 1/3 of our triad, probably the Navy, due to the Russians basically knowing everything that we were doing at that particular time.
Is that remarkable? War-winning implications. One man. No wonder he was called strategic, an agent of strategic importance, agent number 1.
In 1985, no one in the American Secret Service imagined it could get any worse. And they certainly didn't imagine that it would be a senior FBI agent who would make Walker pale into insignificance. But they didn't really know Robert Hansen.
He was a man that bureaucratically looked powerless. He was a man that was a gray man, a man who was always asked to come to the meeting, but never would sit at the table, always sit as a wall sitter, always relied on, leaned on, looked at, but never led the ship. He was never going to be the captain of the ship. And Bob sat within him his understanding that you don't have to make me the leader of the ship. I'm running this ship because I'm sitting here against the wall and you're looking for the greatest spy there is, and it's me.
Often using a drop site not far from his home on Talisman Drive, in the Washington suburb of Vienna, he gave away more than 6,000 pages of top-secret information. Hansen would leave a package hidden on a girder under a footbridge in a nearby wood. The package often contained a floppy disk.
He knew that on the disk, you had, I think, 27 different places you could lay down technology. He found that there was a 28th one there, and he laid down his technology on the 28th channel. And then he passed it to the Russians so that if you or I or anybody else picked up that disk and put it in our computer, it would look like it was blank.
By the time of his arrest on February the 18th, 2001, communism had collapsed. But Hansen had continued to betray every secret he could lay his hands on.
And when you get down to the heart of espionage, it's about people, and it's about the dark side of people. Bob Hansen, in very simple terms, turned to the dark side of the Force to give himself ultimate power. I like to say that he was Skywalker who turned into Darth Vader.
Darth Vader? Maybe not. But by using a floppy disk, Hansen took spying into the 21st century. Today, the World Wide Web has given spies a whole new playground and new gadgets with which to play.
A keystroke reader is a very small device that has the ability to memorize all the keystrokes made over a considerable period of time. Okay, so I've typed a little letter in there. Tell it not to save it. Go back into the word processor and type in a special password, and a menu immediately comes up. And if we go 1, view memory, all the keystrokes come up, including the backspaces. That's the unit. This is the end the keyboard plugs into, and this end plugs into the computer. And from that minute on, it records every single keystroke that the machine makes and holds it in memory until you want to access it. We do have versions of this which will do virtually the same thing, but it does have one very big advantage in that you can send a program via the email that invisibly inserts itself into the computer. So you don't actually have to have access to the computer that's being monitored at all.
But no matter how good your gadget, we'll always need living, breathing human agents with courage and determination to get up close and personal and slug it out with the other side. Preferably while wearing a nice dinner jacket.
Oh, he's still oh so smooth. Well, as powerful as 1,000 hurricanes, tsunamis represent one of the most terrifying natural forces on this planet. Join us Friday at 8 for closer inspection in killer waves. Next on 5, Witness to the Mob.